I took the job because I needed the money, and because nobody else wanted to spend July alone on a mountain maintaining a ski resort that hadn't seen snow in 3 months. The drive up took 4 hours. The access road twisted through dense pine forest that smelled like hot sap and dead needles. My truck's thermometer read 92 degrees when I pulled into the empty parking lot. The resort sat at 7,200 feet sprawling across 3 peaks connected by lift cables that hung motionless in the still air. Every building looked sun-bleached and tired. A man named Garrett met me at the main lodge. He was 50 or 60 with a face like cracked leather and hands that never stopped moving. He handed me 2 keys on a brass ring. Silver one's the maintenance shed. Copper one's your cabin. You're in Aspen 7, east side of the property. Radio's already there, channel 4 only. You check in at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., no exceptions. He walked me through the lodge. Our footsteps echoed on the wooden floors. Dust hung in the afternoon light slanting through the tall windows. The place could hold 300 guests during season. Now it held silence and the smell of old carpet. Your job's simple, Garrett said. Walk the property twice daily. Check all the structures for damage, wildlife intrusion, weather issues. Log everything. Keep the grounds clear. Don't let the forest reclaim what we built. He stopped at a bulletin board near the kitchen. A laminated sheet hung there, yellowed at the edges. This is the important part, he said. These rules aren't suggestions. Previous groundskeepers who ignored them didn't finish their contracts. He didn't elaborate. He pulled the sheet down and handed it to me. Read it tonight. Follow it exactly. I'll be back in 30 days with your pay and supplies. Radio works anywhere on the property, but only channel 4. Don't change it. He left before I could ask questions. I heard his truck descend the mountain, the engine noise fading into the forest quiet. I drove to Aspen 7. The cabin was small but clean. 1 room with a bed, a table, a kitchenette, and a wood stove. The radio sat on the table, a black handheld unit with a cracked LCD screen. I tested it. Static on every channel except 4, which gave a clear carrier tone. The sun was setting. I made coffee and sat down to read the rules. Summer Groundskeeper Protocol 1. Perform morning patrol between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. Perform evening patrol between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. Radio check-in required at start and end of each patrol. 2. The main lodge must remain locked at all times. Enter only to inspect for damage. Exit before 15 minutes have passed. Count your time carefully. 3. Between 2:47 a.m. and 3:11 a.m., do not look at the ski lifts. If you hear the cables moving during this window, remain indoors with all curtains drawn. 4. If you encounter another person on the property, verify their identification and purpose before engaging. All authorized visitors will have documentation signed by Garrett. 5. The timberline trail that circles the resort is exactly 4.3 miles. If your patrol measures longer or shorter by more than 200 yards, return to your cabin immediately and do not complete the circuit. 6. Do not enter the Summit Day Lodge after sunset. If lights are visible in the Summit Day Lodge after sunset, note the time and location in your log but do not investigate. 7. Wildlife is common. Deer, elk, black bears, and coyotes are all native. If you see a mountain lion, any white animal, or any animal moving backwards, retreat to the nearest building and wait 30 minutes before resuming patrol. 8. The equipment shed contains all tools and supplies. Inventory must be checked every 3rd day. If any item appears that was not on the previous inventory, do not touch it. Note its appearance in your log. 9. Between midnight and 4 a.m., stay in your cabin unless responding to a specific emergency. Monitor radio channel 4 during this window. 10. If someone calls your name, verify you can see them before responding. Do not answer disembodied voices. 11. All exterior doors must remain closed. If you find an exterior door open that you did not open, close it, lock it, and mark the location in your log. Do not enter that building for 24 hours. 12. Maintain a written log of all patrols, observations, and anomalies. Keep the log in your cabin at all times. I read it 3 times. Some rules made sense: wildlife caution, security protocols, documentation. Others felt arbitrary. The time windows seemed too specific. The distance measurement for the trail seemed obsessive. But I needed this job. I'd burned through my savings after losing my position at the State Forestry Department. 3 months of work at $2,000 plus room and board would let me restart somewhere else. I radioed in at 6 p.m. Channel 4, this is Groundskeeper checking in. First evening. The carrier tone hummed. No response came. The rules hadn't said anyone would respond. I locked the cabin and started my evening patrol. The timberline trail began behind the main lodge. I had a headlamp, a measuring wheel, and a clipboard. The air had cooled to 70 degrees. The forest pressed close on both sides, pine and aspen mostly, with patches of scrub oak. I could see 50 yards ahead where the trail curved. I measured as I walked, clicking the wheel every rotation. The trail wound past the ski school building, the rental shop, 3 empty chairlift stations, and a cluster of maintenance sheds. Everything looked weathered but intact. I noted 2 broken windows in the rental shop and a torn section of chain-link fence near the north boundary. At the Summit Day Lodge, I stopped. It sat at the highest point of the resort, accessible only by the Timberline Trail or the now dormant peak lift. The building dark. I checked my watch. 7:43 p.m. The sun had set 20 minutes ago. The front door was closed. I tested it anyway. Locked. I marked it on my log and kept walking. The trail looped back down through aspen groves that glowed pale in the dusk. My measuring wheel clicked steadily. I tried to estimate the distance, maybe 3 miles so far. Another mile or so to complete the circuit. I reached the maintenance shed at 8:14 p.m. My wheel read 4.2 miles, within tolerance. I radioed in. Channel 4, Groundskeeper, evening patrol complete. 4.2 miles, no major issues. Returning to cabin. The carrier tone hummed. Still no response. I spent the rest of the night reviewing my log and preparing for morning. I set an alarm for 5:30 a.m. The cabin had no cell service, no internet, no television. Just the radio and my thoughts. I slept poorly. The altitude made me breathe harder. Every small sound from the forest jerked me half awake. At 2:30 a.m., I woke completely and lay still, remembering Rule 3, 247 to 311. Don't look at the lifts. I checked my watch, 2:31 a.m. 16 minutes until the window started. I got up and closed the curtains. The cabin had 2 windows, both facing north toward the main resort. I made sure the fabric overlapped the frames completely. Then I lay back down in the dark. At 2:47 a.m., I heard it. A distant metallic sound, rhythmic and hollow. The creak of cables under tension. The clank of chairs swaying on their grips. The lifts were running. I stayed in bed. I focused on my breathing. The sound continued for 18 minutes. I counted them. At 3:05 a.m., it stopped. I waited until 3:30 a.m. to open the curtains. The lifts hung motionless in the moonlight. Morning patrol went smoothly. I radioed in at 6 a.m. and completed the circuit by 7:20, 4.3 miles exactly. I noted weather conditions clear, 78 degrees, wind from the southwest at 5 miles per hour, and logged the same 2 broken windows and torn fence. On the 3rd day, I checked the equipment shed inventory. Garrett had left a master list. I went line by line: rakes, shovels, post-hole diggers, chainsaws, fuel cans, hand tools, coils of rope, tarps, nails, screws, salt bags for winter ice, 50 pounds of sand. Everything matched until I reached the back corner. A wooden chair sat there, plain construction, 4 legs, no arms. It hadn't been on the inventory list. I studied it for 2 minutes. It looked decades old. The wood was dark with age and use. Someone had carved initials into the seat back, DH. I didn't touch it. I added it to my log. Day 3, equipment shed, unaccounted chair, initials DH. I left the shed and locked it behind me. That night I heard someone call my name. I was halfway through evening patrol passing the ski school building. The light was failing. I had just noted a loose downspout on the east wall when I heard it. Marcus. My name, clear and close. A man's voice. I stopped walking. I turned slowly, scanning the area. The voice had come from behind the ski school building. I couldn't see anyone. "Hello?" I called. No answer. I took 3 steps toward the corner of the building, then stopped. Rule 10. Verify you can see them before responding. I hadn't seen anyone. I returned to the trail and continued my patrol. My heart hammered. The voice had sounded real, not like wind or a bird or my imagination. At 600 yards farther, near the base of the summit lift, I heard it again. "Marcus, wait." Closer this time. Still behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't respond. I walked faster, my measuring wheel clicking double time. The voice didn't call again. I completed the patrol at 7:51 p.m., 4.4 miles. I radioed in and returned to my cabin. I locked the door and wedged a chair under the handle. I added the incident to my log. Day 3, evening patrol, disembodied voice calling name twice, did not respond, did not investigate. I thought about Garrett's words. Previous groundskeepers who ignored the rules didn't finish their contracts. I wondered what that meant. On day 6, I found the first door open. Morning patrol, 7:18 a.m. The rental shop's main entrance stood wide open. I'd walked past it locked the previous evening. The door was heavy steel with a deadbolt. No wind could have opened it. I approached carefully. The interior was dark. Rows of empty ski racks and shelves. Dust and the smell of old rubber. I didn't enter. I pulled the door closed, tested the lock, and marked it in my log. I would not enter the rental shop for 24 hours. At evening patrol, the door was still closed. But the Summit Day Lodge had lights on. I saw them from 500 yards down the trail. Yellow light and 3 second-floor windows. I checked my watch. 7:32 p.m. Well after sunset. I stopped and noted the time and location in my log. I didn't investigate. I continued the circuit and returned to my cabin. The next morning, the Summit Day Lodge was dark. On day 9, the Timberline Trail measured wrong. I started at 6:12 a.m. Perfect weather, clear visibility. I measured carefully, checking the wheel every quarter mile. Past the main lodge, past the ski school, past the rental shop. Everything looked normal. At 2.8 miles, I reached a section of trail I knew well. A sharp switchback through dense aspen. I'd walked it 16 times already, but this morning the trail didn't switch back. It continued straight into the forest. I stopped. I looked behind me. The trail I'd walked was there, clear and worn. I looked ahead. The trail extended straight into trees I'd never seen before. I checked my wheel. 2.8 miles. I turned around. I walked back the way I'd come, measuring in reverse. When I reached my cabin, the wheel read 2.9 miles. Not 4.3, not even close. I radioed in. Channel 4, Groundskeeper. Morning patrol incomplete. Trail measured incorrect, returning to cabin. The carrier tone hummed. Then for the first time, a voice crackled through. Confirmed. Stay inside until evening window. Do not attempt trail again until 6 p.m. The voice was flat, mechanical. Not Garrett. Maybe a recording. I stayed in my cabin. I reviewed the rules again. Rule 5. If the trail measures wrong by more than 200 yards, return immediately. I'd done it right. At 6 p.m., I tried again. The trail measured 4.3 miles exactly. The switchback through the aspen was right where it should be. On day 12, I saw the animal. Evening patrol, 7:04 p.m. I was passing the summit lift when movement caught my eye. An elk, large bull, maybe 700 pounds. It stood 40 yards up the slope, watching me. Then it took a step backward, not turning around. Moving backward, rear legs first, like a film in reverse. Its eyes never left me. It took another step backward, then another, moving uphill in reverse until it disappeared into the trees. I retreated to the main lodge and waited 30 minutes. When I resumed patrol, the elk was gone. On day 15, halfway through my contract, Garrett returned. He arrived mid-morning in a white pickup loaded with supplies. He was alone. He handed me a box of food, canned goods, dried pasta, coffee, salt, and a sealed envelope with my first payment. $1,000 in cash. "Any problems?" he asked. I told him about the chair in the shed, the open door, the lights in the Summit Day Lodge, the backward elk. I showed him my log. He read it carefully. His expression didn't change. "You followed the rules exactly?" "Yes." "Then you're doing fine. Most people don't make it 2 weeks." "What happened to the previous groundskeeper?" Garrett looked at the forest. He thought the rules were superstition. He investigated the lights in the Summit Day Lodge. We found his truck a week later. Never found him. "What's up there?" "Nothing you need to see," Garrett said, "and keep following the rules. I'll be back in 15 days. He left me a second laminated sheet. "Amendments. Read them tonight." He drove away before I could ask more questions. The amendments were taped to my cabin door when I returned from patrol. Protocol amendments effective immediately. 13. Do not speak to anyone who claims to be Garrett unless they provide the current month's verification code. This month's code is Pinecrest. 14. If you see smoke or fire on the property, verify it is real by checking from 2 separate vantage points at least 100 yards apart before responding. 15. The water supply is drawn from the mountain spring. If the water runs brown or contains sediment, do not drink it. Use only bottled water until the flow clears. 16. Tools and equipment must be returned to the shed after each use. Count all items before locking the shed. If any item is missing when you did not remove it, note the missing item in your log but do not search for it. 17. Between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m., all cabin lights must be off except one red filtered lamp. Use minimal light during this window. 18. If your radio receives any transmission on Channel 4 between midnight and 4 a.m., listen but do not respond. Write down the transmission word for word in your log. I read the amendments twice. They felt more urgent than the original rules. More specific. That night I heard the radio. I woke at 1:37 a.m. The red lamp cast a dim glow. The radio on the table crackled to life. "Groundskeeper, Channel 4, report to Summit Day Lodge. Immediate inspection required." I lay still. The voice sounded like the mechanical voice from day 9. Flat. Artificial. I didn't respond. I didn't move. The radio crackled again. "Groundskeeper, confirm. Summit Day Lodge inspection required." I got up slowly. I picked up my log and wrote down the transmission word for word. I checked my watch. 1:39 a.m. The radio went silent. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At 6 a.m., I radioed in for morning patrol. No response, just the carrier tone. On day 18, I found the inventory discrepancy. I was checking the equipment shed for the 6th time. Everything matched the master list until I reached the chainsaws. We should have had 3. I counted 4. The 4th was older than the others, with a blade that looked freshly sharpened. It hadn't been there during my previous inventory. I didn't touch it. I noted it in my log. That evening, the 4-pound bag of salt was missing. I spent an hour searching the shed. The salt had been there during my morning inventory. I'd seen it clearly, third shelf on the west wall. Now the space was empty. No torn bag, no spilled granules, just gone. I added it to my log. Day 18, evening inventory, 4-pound salt bag missing, no evidence of removal. I locked the shed and returned to my cabin. The sun was setting. I had 30 minutes before I needed to start evening patrol. I made coffee and sat at the table studying my log. Patterns were emerging, items appearing, items disappearing. The chair with initials, the extra chainsaw, now missing salt. Salt. I thought about Rule 17. The salt bags were for winter ice, Garrett had said, but why would salt go missing in July? I didn't have an answer. At 6 p.m. I started patrol. The evening was unusually quiet. No birds, no wind, just my footsteps and the click of the measuring wheel. At 1.7 miles, I passed the ski school building. The loose downspout I'd noted on day 3 was gone. Not repaired. Gone. The entire section of gutter had been removed. Clean cuts at both ends, like someone had taken a saw to it. I hadn't removed it. I hadn't authorized any repairs. I added it to my log and kept walking. At 3.1 miles near the summit lift, I found the salt. It was arranged in a perfect circle on the trail, a ring of white granules maybe 6 feet in diameter. The 4 pounds spread carefully. Someone had taken their time. I stopped at the edge of the circle. I didn't step inside. I didn't touch the salt. I walked around it, measured the remaining trail, and completed my patrol. 4.3 miles. I radioed in and returned to my cabin. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the circle. On day 20, I had the dream. I was walking the timberline trail at night. No headlamp. The moon was full and everything glowed silver. I could see perfectly. The trail stretched ahead exactly 4.3 miles. But someone was walking behind me. I could hear their footsteps. Same pace as mine. When I stopped, they stopped. When I started again, they started. I never turned around. The dream continued for what felt like hours, just walking and listening to the footsteps. They never got closer, never farther away. I woke at 4:17 a.m., drenched in sweat. I stayed awake until morning. At first light, I performed my radio check and started patrol. The salt circle was still there, untouched. I measured around it and continued. On day 22, I saw the figure in the Summit Day Lodge. Evening patrol, 7:41 p.m. I was completing my circuit, passing below the summit lift. The lodge sat 300 yards upslope. No lights were visible in the windows, then movement. A figure crossing past a second-floor window. Brief silhouette, human-shaped. I stopped walking. I watched for 5 minutes. No more movement, no lights. I noted it in my log and continued patrol. That night, someone knocked on my cabin door. 3 sharp knocks. I was sitting at the table eating canned soup. It was 8:34 p.m. I set down my spoon. I didn't move toward the door. 3 more knocks. Harder. "Marcus, it's Garrett. Let me in." The voice sounded exactly like Garrett. Same gravel tone, same cadence. I stood up. I approached the door but didn't unlock it. "What's the verification code?" I asked. Silence. Then, "Open the door, Marcus." "What's the code?" More silence. Then footsteps moving away from the cabin, crunching gravel. I looked out the window, nothing. The yard was empty. I checked all the locks. I wedged chairs under both doors. I left the red lamp on and sat awake until morning. On day 23, I found footprints. Morning patrol, 6:32 a.m. The ground near my cabin was soft from overnight dew. Clear boot prints circled the structure. I counted them, 47 complete circuits. The prints were my size, my tread pattern. But I hadn't walked around my cabin last night. I took photographs with my phone even though there was no service to send them. Documentation felt important. Then I started my patrol. The salt circle was gone. Not scattered, Gone. The trail showed no trace of it. I checked my measuring wheel. Still 4.3 miles total. At the equipment shed, I found another chair. Same construction as the first two. Initials carved in the back. RT, 3 chairs now. I didn't touch it. I added it to my log and locked the shed. That evening, I performed the most careful patrol of my contract. I measured every section twice. I noted every shadow, every sound, every detail. The ritual of documentation kept me focused. At the Summit Day Lodge, I stopped farther back than usual. Maybe 400 yards down the trail. I wanted distance. The windows were dark, but I could hear something. Faint music. Old-fashioned, like a phonograph. Big band era, maybe. Trumpets and clarinets filtering down through the trees. I checked my watch. 7:53 p.m., well after sunset. I noted it in my log. I didn't investigate. I completed my circuit and returned to my cabin. The music played until midnight. On day 25, Garrett returned. Real Garrett. He arrived at noon in the white pickup. He looked tired. "Any problems?" he asked. I told him about the radio transmission, the knocking, the figure in the Summit Day Lodge, the salt circle, the footprints, the music. "Did you follow the protocols?" "Everyone." "Good. 5 more days and you're done. Last stretch is always hardest." He gave me the final payment envelope and fresh supplies. He looked at my log, nodded, and started to leave. "What's in the Summit Day Lodge?" I asked. He stopped. "Something that needs to be left alone. Don't think about it, just finish your contract." "The previous groundskeeper. You said you never found him." "We didn't. But we found what was left of his radio. It was in the Summit Day Lodge, melted." Garrett paused at his truck door. 3 chairs in the shed now?" "Yes, DH, ML, and RT. RT was before my time. DH was 8 years ago. ML was last summer." He looked at the forest. "The mountain keeps them in a way. Don't ask me to explain it. I can't." "How many groundskeepers total?" "You're number 19. 11 finished their contracts. 8 didn't." Garrett drove away. That night the power went out. I was preparing dinner when the cabin lights died. 8:06 p.m. I grabbed my flashlight and checked the breaker panel. Everything looked normal. I flipped the main breaker off and on. Nothing. I lit the red lamp. It cast weak light across the cabin. I could see 10 feet in any direction. The radio crackled. "Groundskeeper, Channel 4, power failure protocol in effect. Remain indoors until sunrise. Do not use flashlights or headlamps. Red light only." The mechanical voice again. "Acknowledge." I picked up the radio. "Acknowledged, red light only." The carrier tone hummed. At 9:32 p.m., I heard footsteps outside, slow and deliberate, circling the cabin. I counted them. They came every 3 seconds. Perfectly regular, like clockwork. I sat at the table with my log and the red lamp. I didn't look out the windows. The footsteps continued for 2 hours. Then they stopped. At midnight, the lifts started running. I heard the cables first, then the hollow clank of chairs. Then something else, voices, faint and distant, laughter, conversations, dozens of people talking at once. The resort was empty. I was alone on this mountain. I closed my eyes. I focused on breathing. The rules didn't cover this. The rules said stay indoors during power failures. Use red light only. Wait for sunrise. I waited. The voices continued until 3:11 a.m., then silence. The power returned at 5:43 a.m. I heard the refrigerator kick on. The cabin lights blazed. I turned them off immediately. At 6 a.m., I radioed in and began morning patrol. The trail measured 4.3 miles. Everything looked normal. The Summit Day Lodge was dark and quiet. On day 28, I found the second chair. Equipment shed inventory. Another wooden chair identical to the first. Same dark wood. Same construction. These initials, ML. Wait, that was wrong. I checked my log. ML was already there. I'd found it weeks ago. This was the fourth chair, but the initials repeated. I studied both ML chairs. They were identical. Same wear patterns, same carving style, like duplicates. I added it to my log. Day 28, equipment shed, duplicate ML chair, 4 chairs total. That evening, I counted my steps. Something felt wrong during patrol. The trail looked right, the distance measured right, but my footsteps sounded wrong, like they were echoing. I stopped walking and listened. The echo continued for 3 more steps. Someone was walking behind me, matching my pace. I remembered the dream. I didn't turn around. I walked faster. The echoing footsteps kept pace. I reached the main lodge and radioed in. Channel 4 Groundskeeper, evening patrol complete. The carrier tone hummed. Then, "Are you alone?" The mechanical voice, but the question was new. "Yes," I said, "and confirm visual." I turned around slowly. The trail behind me was empty. No one. Nothing. Confirmed. No one visible. Return to cabin. Lock all entry points. I did. On day 29, my last full day, the trail changed again. Morning patrol, 6:08 a.m. Started from the cabin, measuring carefully. Everything was normal until I reached the 3-mile mark. The Summit Day Lodge wasn't where it should be. It should have been upslope to my right, 300 yards distant. But I couldn't see it. The slope was there, covered in pine and aspen. No lodge. I checked my map. I checked my position. I was in the right place. The lodge was gone. I continued the circuit. My wheel read 4.3 miles when I returned to the cabin. But I never saw the Summit Day Lodge. I radioed in. Channel 4 Groundskeeper, anomaly to report. Summit Day Lodge not visible from trail. No response, just the carrier tone. I tried again. Channel 4 request confirmation. Summit Day Lodge location. Static, then the mechanical voice. Structure not relevant to patrol duties. Continue normal operations. That night I prepared to leave. Garrett would arrive tomorrow morning. I packed my gear. I reviewed my log one final time. 29 days of notes, pages of observations, anomalies, rule compliance. I wrote a final entry. Day 29, evening, contract nearly complete. All protocols followed exactly. No injuries, no major incidents, property secure. Next groundskeeper advised to read all rules and amendments carefully. Trust the procedures. Do not investigate anomalies. Do not break protocol under any circumstances. At 2:47 a.m., I woke to the sound of the lifts. This time I looked. I got out of bed and opened the curtains. The rule said don't look between 2:47 and 3:11. I checked my watch. 2:49. I looked anyway. The lifts were running. Every chair was occupied. Dozens of people riding up the mountain in the middle of the night. I could see them clearly in the moonlight. They all faced forward. They all sat perfectly still. The cables creaked. The chairs swayed. The riders never moved. I watched until 3:11. At exactly 3:11, the lifts stopped. The chairs hung motionless. Every seat was empty. I closed the curtains. I went back to bed. I added one final note to my log. Broke Rule 3, final night. Observed phenomenon. No immediate consequence. Do not recommend. Garrett arrived at 9:30 a.m. on day 30. He inspected my cabin, checked my log, and counted the equipment inventory. He noted the 4 chairs. He didn't seem surprised. You did good, he said. Better than most. Contract complete. You want to come back next summer? I looked at the forest. I looked at the empty resort. I thought about the voices, the footsteps, the backward elk, the figure in the Summit Day Lodge. No, I said. Fair enough. Most people don't. He handed me a manila envelope. Final payment and reference letter. You need anything else? Who's DH and ML? I asked. The initials on the chairs. Garrett was quiet for a moment. Previous groundskeepers. Both broke protocol. DH entered the Summit Day Lodge after sunset. ML investigated the trail when it measured wrong. Neither completed their contracts. You said you found DH's truck. We did. And now we've got his chair. Why are there 2 ML chairs? Garrett's expression hardened. Because he tried twice. Thought he could outsmart it the second time. Mountain got him both times. He paused. You broke Rule 3 last night. I went cold. How did you know? Your log. You wrote it down, honest at least. He studied me. You're lucky. Most people who break rules don't get to walk away, but you only broke it on your last night after proving yourself for 29 days. Maybe that counted for something. Garrett drove me down the mountain. We didn't talk. When we reached the main road, he pulled over and looked at me. You followed the rules exactly. That's why you're leaving. Remember that if you ever tell anyone about this place. I nodded. He handed me one more item. A sealed letter with a name I didn't recognize. Next groundskeeper, he said. Arrives in 3 days. Make sure he gets this. Why me? Because you survived. Because you know what it takes. Pass it on. I took the letter. I drove home. I didn't look back. 3 days later, I mailed the letter to the address Garrett had provided. Inside, I'd added a single sheet of paper with my own note. Read all the rules carefully. Follow every single one. Count your time. Measure your distances. Trust nothing that seems wrong. Don't investigate. Don't break protocol. The job is simple if you obey. Previous groundskeepers who didn't obey are now furniture in the equipment shed. You'll see their chairs. You might become one too. Choose carefully. The salt will disappear. The trail will change. Voices will call your name. Do not answer. Do not look. Do not investigate. The Summit Day Lodge is not empty. Stay away from it. The lifts run between 247 and 311. Keep your curtains closed. You will hear footsteps. You will hear music. You will see things that shouldn't be there. Document everything, but do not engage. The mountain is watching. It tests you. Pass the test by doing nothing except what the rules require. Trust Garrett. Trust the protocols. Trust nothing else. Good luck. I signed it with my initials. MK. I never went back to the mountain, but sometimes late at night I still hear footsteps circling my apartment. I still count them. Every 3 seconds, perfectly regular. I close my curtains between 2:47 and 3:11 a.m. I follow the rules even now. Some habits you never break. Because somewhere on that mountain in an equipment shed there are 4 wooden chairs, and I know that any one of them could have been mine.